Welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Cordez. I'm a professor of biology at Temple University in Philadelphia in the USA. Um, and I want to thank the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel for inviting me to come speak with you today and talk about the significance of methane seeps to our global ocean. This is really all part of a larger effort by the UN, which declared this the Ocean Decade, and trying to connect science to policy decisions and our management of the resources and economic activities that occur in the global ocean. The ocean gives us all sorts of different things, including extractive resources, which include seafood, fisheries, energy like oil and gas, genetic resources, which come from the biodiversity of the ocean and the evolutionary history of the creatures that live there. Carbon sequestration is a very important resource where the carbon from the atmosphere goes into the ocean, and then from the surface ocean to the deep ocean, where it can be sequestered for thousands of years and taken out of that system, where it more significantly impacts us directly. And nutrient regeneration, which is the recycling of nitrogen, phosphorus, other minerals into usable form and transport of that back up to the surface. These processes are maintained in a number of different places naturally. The deep sea coral reefs is a good example, and this is one of the reefs off of the east coast of the United States underneath the Gulf Stream, which are the purple current on the left here. And these coral reefs are taking in more carbon than they release. They're taking all the food and nutrients coming down from the surface, all that waste coming down from the surface, and recycling it into nitrate and phosphate, which then can get entrained in eddies, can be directly transported by fish and other processes and brought back up to the surface to fuel primary productivity, which fuels those fisheries. And therefore, our economy, the blue economy, everything we get from the ocean, is really reliant on the deep sea to maintain those processes. This is also true in the Mediterranean Sea, as it is everywhere else. And you can see in the far eastern Mediterranean Sea the upwelling that's occurring, that's bringing these cool, high nutrient rich waters from the depth up to the surface, where it can help to fuel the productivity and the fisheries that are in the Eastern Med. Specifically, we're talking about here chemosynthetic ecosystems, methane seeps and hydrothermal vents that rely on reduced chemicals like methane, hydrogen sulfide to provide energy that the microbial communities that live at these communities can turn into food for organisms. These can be internal symbionts in the case of the tube worms and mussels, or this is free-living bacteria that predators come in from the outside to eat and then export into the surrounding deep sea, kilometers away in some cases. But we're also talking about the vertical connection and the bubbles, the flares coming off of a methane seep that can transport nutrients to the surface, push microbial productivity out of the seep where it can be utilized by other organisms, and provide connectivity in terms of the larval dispersal. So here's an example. This is off of the coast of Costa Rica. This is an active seep. There's a small thermal anomaly, which is causing the temperature of shimmering water here that you see, but that can help you see the speed of flow that we're talking about in this area and in a lot of the seeps. And this is a bunch of mussels, small tube worms that have settled recently, along with snails and limpets that are feeding off that bacterial productivity. The tube worms have internal bacterial symbionts that they are entirely reliant on. They have no digestive tract as an adult, no mouth, no guts. They only use these bacterial symbionts to produce all of their food, and they produce this from hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, dissolved inorganic carbon that's in the seawater. These habitats occur as sort of a mosaic of different patches. So you can have a point source of a seep in the middle, And then as you go out, you can have mussels and clams and tube worms that are all co-occurring in lots of different patches wherever there's seeping fluids coming out. But as you even get further and further away from that seep field, which can be hundreds of meters across, you start to get beyond that. This is a place where these tube worms are still surviving. They can mine sulfide out of the sediments, or in some cases even out of cracks in the rock. And other creatures can settle on them. They're creating habitat for the fuzzy creatures here that you see. Those are sabellid and serpulid fan worms. They also have symbionts in their gills. This is something that we just discovered a few years ago. And they occur in a much further distance from those point sources of seepage. So you can see in the map in the bottom left that those are hundreds of meters away from where the seep is originating, and yet they're still using this methane and sulfide and their bacteria in their gills to supplement their food and to help them to survive, grow faster, reproduce more, all of that. And so the seep influence can extend beyond where we thought it could even just a few years ago. As you continue to go out, you find corals on the outskirts of the seeps. These are usually just taking advantage of the hard substrate that's produced by the seep. Byproduct of methane oxidation is authigenic carbonate precipitation. So the carbon in the methane ends up in a carbonate rock, calcium carbonate that forms on the seafloor, and this can provide hard substrate in areas that are mostly mud, which is true for a lot of the deep sea, including the Eastern Mediterranean. But even some of these corals that are living way out on the periphery of the seeps contain symbionts. And these have bacteria that are living inside of them that can use that hydrogen sulfide, the methane, that's making it out of the seep, that is only occasionally making it to the exterior of the seep. They can still use those chemicals from the bacteria that are living in there and make their food, again, supplementing their diet. They're not completely reliant on it like the tube worms are, but this is helping them to survive, grow faster, reproduce more, and be successful, increase their fitness in the deep ocean. So again, these influences are a lot further than we thought they were. They even extend up into the water column, and this is a lot of data that I'm showing you here. But if you look on the left, you can see in shallower waters, you can see the presence of nutrients that are making it higher up in the water column and fueling a chlorophyll maximum that's shallower over the seep than it is over non-seep areas. And this can go all the way to the surface where we can measure increased phytoplankton productivity right over a seep. This is really just the bubble effect, the bubbles coming out of the seep, pushing the water above them and pushing all that cold water and those nutrients up to the surface and affecting the productivity of the entire ocean in that area. Bubbles can be really vigorous. This is a seep off of the east coast of the United States. Again, those methane bubbles coming out, expanding as they rise, pushing deep water up with them. The bacterial mats, the white stuff that you see in the seafloor here, is extra productivity for these squid. This is a commercially fished species. There's another commercially fished fish that is living around the seeps, and you can see the sea stars coming in to feed off of this productivity. You can see the fish taking advantage of the substrate of the carbonate rocks around the edge, and you see golden crab, which is a commercial species, rockfish, which are a commercial species, the cat sharks, which live in this area that are important predators in the deep ocean. So this really diverse community that's coming in from the outside of the seep, not normally creatures that we would call seep organisms, but coming in to take advantage of the food, of the shelter, of all the other resources that are there at these cold seeps, and then exporting it. These fish don't just live here, they live elsewhere. The squid are swimming around. They're interacting with higher trophic levels, up to large fish, tuna, and then all the way up to whales in some cases, that are connected back to the seep and the productivity and the resources that are there. This is such a significant process that in California, seeps have been recognized as essential fish habitat. This is a management unit in the United States. These can be designated as marine protected areas where fishing or oil and gas drilling can be prohibited within a certain area. Now you can see that in this case, this is a large blanket area, but this can also be a mosaic, a sort of patchwork of different protected areas that are much smaller. And let me explain that. So here, this is a review that we did about 10 years ago on oil and gas operations. This compiled literature from around the world and looked at the impacts from typical operations, not including very large oil spills, which we know can cover a much larger area. But rigs usually don't have this structure that goes all the way to the seafloor like this image anymore. You often have anchors and chains that go out 1.5 times the depth of operations. So if you're in 1 kilometer of water, these can extend 1.5 kilometers out. Around any of the bottom contact of those anchor chains and anchors, you've got a halo of about 100 meters where you see impacts, including digging into the sediment, overturned boulders, those kinds of things that can directly kill organisms. Around the base where you're drilling, you also have drill cuttings that are down there that are rich in some types of heavy metals, other kinds of toxins, hydrocarbons, of course. And barium is one that we use as an indicator that can be detected hundreds of meters away in the water column, and in some cases, 1 to 3 kilometers away, it's been detected where the currents are moving right, or these water masses are going in one single direction. And then you can have changes in the bottom communities that result in that are, again, usually within a couple hundred meters, but can extend out to 3 kilometers in some cases. Considering all of that data and information and synthesizing all of that, our recommendation from this review article was a buffer distance of about 2 kilometers from any sensitive habitat that you don't want to get disrupted by oil and gas drilling. So any rig that you put out there should be at least 2 kilometers from the edge of the seep feature. So the edge of the pockmark, and then even a little beyond the edge of the pockmark where you've got these other interactions with the seep that I showed you. The seep isn't just that point source, it extends out further than that. And then you have to draw a 2 kilometer radius around that to make sure that you're not impacting the seep and all the important ecosystem functions that it's producing. So this is the situation in the Levant Basin in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Israeli waters, where you have this reservoir of hydrocarbons down in the bottom here. It's coming out in point sources and traveling along these conduits, these fractures that go all the way up to the surface. The gas forms these pockmarks as where it blows out occasionally when it gets trapped and then blows out. And then you have these gas bubbles. These are pushing nutrients up to the shallow waters. Fish are coming in and using these habitats. You have bacterial productivity that's being exported. All those processes that I talk about were happening in this pockmark and on the outside. And so we would suggest that around that, you draw a 2 kilometer buffer, and then other oil and gas and fishing activities could occur as long as there are no other sensitive habitats out there. And if you look down in the bottom, the scale of this whole thing is 20 to 30 kilometers across. And so moving 2 kilometers away from a pockmark, you can still tap into the exact same reservoir that's feeding that pockmark. You're not missing anything. You're not losing access to the oil and gas. It's still there. You're tapping into the same thing. You've just relocated the industrial activity so it's not affecting the seep on the seafloor, which can have repercussions for your fisheries and for other resources, other, again, economic and ecosystem services that are being provided by the seep. So this is all part of this broader Ocean Decade movement where we're trying to preserve the water, the resources, the beauty of these places, the energy, the recreation, transport, all these uses. We want a healthy, clean ocean that's sustainable, productive, safe. That requires input from scientists and just the kinds of data that I was presenting here. It's said that we don't know a lot about the deep sea, but I think now, after decades of research, we do understand a lot about the deep sea. We know, for the most part, what's down there. There's always going to be new discoveries, but we know how to manage these resources. We've learned from our past mistakes, and we've learned from a lot of new data, a lot of new mapping, a lot of new access that we have these days. We can take that scientific knowledge, pass it on to the stakeholders, for example, what we're doing today, and then those stakeholders can take actions and can manage them properly. Just this sort of network of patches where you're excluding drilling is going to maintain these seeps, maintain the resources that you get from those seeps beyond just the direct extraction of gas, and again, contribute to overall human well-being. Thank you for your attention. Again, thank you to the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel for your invitation, for a bunch of my collaborators, the ships and vehicles that I use, and our funding sources. And please, if you have any further questions or want to reach out about anything you saw in this presentation, please don't hesitate. Thank you very much.